probably the biggest surprise, or at least one of the biggest surprises that happened this past NBA season, is how good the Oklahoma City Thunder wound up being and how great Chris Paul was all year. I mean, there is no doubt after this season there's been an added level of respect when discussing this man Chris Paul as a player. I mean, even the people who have been calling him CP0 for years as a joke on how many rings and championships he has had to acknowledge the greatness and just show some fake love.
Look, just real quick, let me finish. We kidded about this last year, and I started calling him CP0 because he has 0 rings. Well, obviously...
Yeah, just so hilarious. Y'all probably thought we forgot. We didn't, but yeah, I'm gonna go more in depth later in the vid. But long story short, this season CP3 improved his current value as a player, and now teams want him. And recently, a couple rumors broke out that the Lakers have an interest in somehow getting Chris Paul through a trade. And I'm sure we are all aware that the Lakers actually pulling this off is extremely unlikely. However, just the thought of it even being a possibility has led to this video idea where I'm gonna discuss why this trade needs to happen, seriously, and just a couple scenarios in which it could happen. But before I do, man, what's good YouTube? Plug Speaks back with the vid. If you're new, subscribe. If you believe in CP3, you want him to get a ring, sub up. I'm dropping quality basketball content 2 to 3 times a week, and we're trying to hit 1K within a month, so help us achieve the goal. And back to the video. So as I mentioned in the intro, this season was so impressive from CP3, being that he started the season as a 34-year-old and had the red flag of his history of battling injuries, specifically with recurring issues to his hamstring. He also had popular media members starting this narrative that he's washed, which is something that you never want to hear, especially as an aging player.
Look, and getting rid of Chris Paul. Chris Paul's a shell of himself. Chris Paul was at the throat of James Harden at the end of the year.
But you see, neither his climbing age, risk for injury, or the outside chatter was able to stop him from performing at an all-star level and getting OKC to the 5th seed, really tied for the 4th seed with the Rockets in their very competitive Western Conference. And OKC's underdog run would keep going all the way to a Game 7 in the first round where their season would end. And it all came down to one possession in which James Harden, of all people, had the huge defensive play of blocking the shot that held their chances of continuing to surprise most of us in the postseason. But despite this ending, most of us would probably agree this season was a W for the Thunder and CP3. However, still not all is well, because although the Thunder are sort of on the come up, they are still far away from title contention, which does not make them an ideal location for Chris Paul at all. I mean, come on now, as he tries to finish his career continuing to battle for a ring. And so that makes the recent trade rumors regarding not even just the Lakers, but also other good teams like the Bucks make even more sense. And I'm gonna get into what makes a trade like this so difficult to actually follow through with, along with some other trade scenarios. But real quick, on a more opinionated note, let me first talk about why this really needs to happen. You know, there aren't too many players out there that you just feel deserve to win a ring. I mean, you got D Rose, Brandon Roy, Dwight Howard was one of them, and he finally got one. But yeah, y'all get the point, and I'm sure a lot of us would agree Chris Paul is one of them. I mean, how good he is as just a 6-footer in the NBA is something I already believe is largely overlooked, but that's not even one of the main reasons I believe he deserves one. But instead, because it's like every time he got close or had the opportunity, things somehow went left. And just to name a couple situations, we all know about the tough veto on a trade that would have landed him on the Lakers while he was just entering his prime back in 2011. If it went through when he joined the late great Kobe Bryant prior to his Achilles injury on a competitive Lakers team, who knows what his career would look like today. But that's not all, that's just the beginning. You got another situation with the 2015 playoffs when Chris Paul led the Clippers past the defending champion Spurs in a classic emotional first round 7-game series, all while battling a hamstring injury just to go up 3-1 in the second round versus the Rockets and lose in what looked like was going to be his first Western Conference appearance. And I'm not gonna sit here and lie, those Clippers most likely would have got stomped on by the Warriors just like the Rockets did, but really we will never know. But moving on to yet another situation, you got the 2018 playoffs, which is probably the most unfortunate situation of them all, because Chris Paul and James Harden led the Rockets to the Western Conference Finals, where they would go up 3-2 versus the Warriors, who had a healthy KD and Curry. But Chris Paul was unable to play in both Game 6 and 7 to help close out those Warriors due to an injury, and the Rockets lose, while the Warriors go on to sweep the Cavs and win back-to-back championships. Like, it's very tough. Just imagine if Chris Paul was able to play and help beat those Warriors. That Rockets team more than likely beats those Cavs. I mean, it was just LeBron, but We will never know, man. Chris Paul's bad luck is beyond me, but the reasoning is pretty clear. He deserves a ring. You hate to see this happen to a seemingly good dude, but I'm done praising the man. Now, as far as the CP3 trade scenarios go, the number one factor in what makes it so difficult for a team like the Lakers to actually land him is his terrible contract. Like, I know I have been praising him, but his contract is so bad right now, if we're being real, because he is 35 and he signed a 4-year, $159 million contract before the 2018-19 NBA season. And now that it is 2020 going into 2021, he still has 2 more years on his contract with about $80 million remaining to be paid. And any team that is already a contender such as the Lakers would not be too excited to take on this contract. And honestly, looking at the 2021 season, nothing major has happened to give people a reason to believe that the Lakers wouldn't be the favorites going into next season anyway, so long as they keep the key contributors of their past season's championship run. However, that's too bad, because the title of this video is that this trade needs to happen for the sake of Chris Paul getting the ring he deserves. I mean, if the Lakers actually pulled this off, they would have a super team damn near. Although Chris Paul is no longer a superstar in the eyes of most of us, including me, but he is still an all-star, and you'd be surprised at who suddenly believes he's a superstar now that there's even a slight chance he could team up with LeBron.
Today, I just sat back and shook my head again because I said, once and for all, this disqualifies LeBron James from the GOAT debate, because GOATs don't chase superstar teammates.
Skip Bayless is some real comedy, but man, time for these trade scenarios. And I'm not a huge cap space numbers guy or guru or anything like that, so don't get crazy triggered, but look, I got one possibility that might work in some miraculous way, and that is a deal between the Lakers and OKC, where the Lakers would gain Chris Paul, of course, and OKC would gain Kyle Kuzma, Danny Green, Rajon Rondo, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, aka KCP. Now, before I give explanations for getting rid of these players, let me first acknowledge that until November 21st, it's not even possible for the Lakers to trade Rondo or KCP, so that would kind of invalidate this off tops. However, not really, because November 21st is not that far away, and also there was a scenario I saw during my research in which a third team could help pull this off, but I wasn't about to just copy their trade, so instead I will link it in the description if you're that interested. Also, for those that say OKC would be over the roster limit of 15, they would just waive guys that they're constantly having to send to the G League, such as Kevin Hervey, who most of you probably never even heard of, and that's not an intended insult. The NBA is a business, we all know that. But now to explain my trade scenario. First off, from the Lakers perspective, come on now, Kyle Kuzma is no huge loss. He did contribute somewhat in the playoffs, however, he is constantly memed for a reason, and it's not because he plays very well. Next, you got Danny Green, who you would think is a very solid piece as a knockdown shooter, but the reality is that he shot 34% in this year's playoffs. Come on now. He even got death threats over basketball, which should never happen, but that says it all. And next, you got Rajon Rondo, a valuable floor general who played well when it mattered for the Lakers and even improved his legacy this year, I'd say. But I mean, you would be getting Chris Paul, an even better floor general, and if we are adding CP3 to this Lakers team, trust and believe we have to get rid of Rondo. Come on now. What's understood does not have to be explained. Anyway, last and probably least, we got KCP, a guy who wasn't terrible for the Lakers in this year's playoffs, but I doubt you could find a single Lakers fan that would be mad about losing him, so there you go. But now for OKC's perspective, and this is going to be real quick because look, I'm not even going to BS and act like getting Kuzma, Danny Green, Rondo, and KCP for CP3 would be ideal, but if anything, if a trade like this were to really somehow occur, then OKC, like I'm not even kidding, should be grateful a team out there was actually willing to take on Chris Paul's robust contract. But yeah, man, that is pretty much the breakdown and wraps this vid up. Yes, I know, very unlikely, but man, can we get this legend CP3 a ring before he retires? It is all that I ask or want, for real. But nah, I appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to like this, sub if new, share, all of that. Tell me what you think about all this below. Even mention a couple of trade scenarios, but yeah, most definitely appreciate y'all watching, and I'm out.